Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books, where we publish books of all types and genres. So whether you have a book in your head, or a manuscript ready to go, or maybe even 400 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer. And yes, at least once a month, I get an envelope full of loose leaf mailed to me. Visit us at redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. I'm so thrilled today to be joined by three authors who have undoubtedly unleashed themselves. Amanda Muratoff is the author of Embrace the Shade. Judy Stanigar is the author of Marika's Best Laid Plan. And Mariam Houli is the author of The Olive Tree. But first, we're going to meet Amanda. Amanda is the author of Embrace the Shade with her co-author, Kayla Hansen. And the authors write, Anne-Marie's legendary magic could incinerate her enemies, but it's her sword she trusts. While running from the men who killed her family, she learns of an ancient text locked within the great library that might be the final key to understanding her curse. During a daring theft, a stranger inserts himself into her scheme. Kin's roguish good looks and boundless charm threaten to distract her, but she has no intention of landing in the city jail. Kin's life, riddled with shadows and death, is as dark as his soul. He embraces his power, given by a wicked master, but when he meets Anne-Marie, she shatters the walls he's built, piercing his solitude with vibrant light. But if she learns he hunts the power cursing her family, he will lose her forever. Trusting him could risk her heart and her life, but it might be the only way to destroy the world's most sinister evil, unless Kin's master finds her first. Please welcome author Amanda Muratoff. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
Oh, glad to have you. Where are you hailing from today?
I am from Langley, BC in Canada.
I love BC. Where exactly is Langley?
Langley is in the Lower Mainland, so I'm about 45 minutes from Vancouver.
Okay, sure. Oh my goodness. The first time I was ever over in British Columbia, I was there for an expo or something years ago. And they played a movie of showing the whole countryside. And I said, I'll move. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. So tell us about your inspiration behind Embrace of the Shade.
Well, Embrace of the Shade is the first book in the Pantracia Chronicles. And, the inspiration actually, it's kind of comes from itself because these characters, Kayla and I started writing about these characters when I was 12 years old and she was 13. And we've actually been building this world for, 20 some odd years. And Kin and Anne-Marie were the first. So it's kind of, their stories have changed a lot and their personalities have gotten a lot less, teenager angst in them because we were very young when we first were writing about them. But it's kind of just been its own inspiration because they were some of the first characters we came up with. And, in 2018, we decided to write in book format instead of how we usually write. And then it just kind of all started. And now we have 10 books published.
I cannot believe you were 12 years old. Years ago, I taught 12-year-olds. I wish they were sitting around writing stories like
I know.
Oh my gosh. You two have been friends since forever. Oh God.
It's been a long time.
You have to tell me how this writing process and your friendship, any fights? I mean, like, you don't have to give me the but I can't imagine.
We argue all the time, honestly. I think most of it happens during like the outlining phase where, if we don't like each other's ideas, then we kind of butt heads a bit, but I think it makes for better stories and it makes the books better because if I don't like something she's come up with, then there's a reason for that. And if she doesn't like something I've come up with, there's a reason for that. And so we kind of push each other to be better. But we actually met on a kids site back in the day called Neopets. I don't know if you remember it, but we met on Neopets. She actually was living in Utah at the time. And we didn't even meet in person until I was 19, I believe. And she happened to be living in California at the time, and me and my dad were going down. So we met, and, you know, we had every opportunity not to get along because we've never met in person before, but we hit it off, and we've been close friends ever since, and co-authors. And, you know, these books are really, like, even more so brought us together.
This is quite the story. Meeting on Neopets, writing stories together when you're 12. Finally, your paths cross. Now, you don't live in the same state now, or
No, I live in Canada, and
right.
she's currently in Maryland, but
even further.
yeah, yes, even further.
At least when she was in California or Utah, it was kind of close to British Columbia, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now there's 3 hours apart, so it gets complicated sometimes, but we make it work.
oh yeah, 3 time zones apart. Even just like having a Zoom meeting is not easy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I cannot imagine. I've never heard of a book pairing starting quite like this. I'm just absolutely adoring it. So tell me about process, especially because you're not in the same place. Like, do you talk together about outline, and then you take turns on chapters? Do you write a page, she writes a page? Do you write different characters? How does this work?
Well, you're probably just going to be more surprised then, because it's actually nothing like that. We sit on Discord or Skype, and we talk, and we have Google Docs open. And how it works is we work on the outline together, and then when it's time to write, we both, like, we sit down at the same time and we start writing on top of each other in Google Docs.
No way.
And yeah, active, like real time. And the reason it works for us is because, like, Amory is mine. She's my character, and Kin is her baby, and he's her character. And so it's what makes our interactions in our books and the dialogue so authentic, is because it's actually Kayla talking for Kin, and it's actually me talking for Amory.
Oh.
And so we don't, like, we have a vague outline of what's supposed to happen in the chapter, but we actually don't know what each other is going to type, what the other character is going to say. So the conversations and the misunderstandings and the arguments, they're generally genuine. So it's
oh my gosh.
yeah, and then we edit the same way. We will read through together at the same time, and we will just make changes as we go. And we do that when we're writing too. You know, Kayla will be writing off on a tangent, and I will be trailing right behind, you know, changing some of the words she's written or fixing her sentences or whatever. And then when I'm, like, leading a chapter, when it's one of my characters' chapters in their perspective, then she kind of does the same thing, and she will add in a bunch of imagery, whereas I'm more of, like, I write the action and she, like, slows it down and puts the imagery in, and we kind of work together that way.
I have had the great fortune of interviewing hundreds and hundreds of authors and some author pairs, and have never met anyone that you were writing in real time. Mm-hmm. Google Doc, there's the cursor, you're fighting for one person, they're fighting for another, the dialogue is like, oh, wow, and you're still friends.
Yes, we're actually closer friends now too, so we must be doing something right.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Now, you said 10 books published. Is that all in this series, or is that other things too?
Yeah, so we have 10 books published in the Pantracia Chronicles. We have 3 more coming. We're currently writing book 12, but we kind of broken our series down into smaller sections. So we have a trilogy, a quadrilogy, and another trilogy right now. And then, like, each set of books has their own main characters. But as you read through the books, there's lots of Easter eggs and, like, hidden cameos and moments where you'll be like, is that character that character? And you kind of start putting it together because they all overlap. It's all one story. We just are choosing to tell it in more of, like, a fantasy Avengers kind of way.
Wow, this is just amazing. I'm telling you, you are just blowing my mind in so many ways. Now, tell me, when it comes to things like the covers. Now you mentioned that you were Amory, and now I'm looking at your cover and saying, yeah, she's a brunette. Was that part of the goal to get some looks going there, or?
Not necessarily. I mean, Emery was based off of, you know, probably who I wanted to be when I was 16 years old.
Mhm.
And, you know, that's why she's very headstrong and very independent and strong. And it's she is her own person at this point. My hair color changes all the time, but yeah.
So tell me, what's next on the hit parade for you and Kayla? More books in this series? Are you thinking about another series? What's going on?
We've got 3 more coming. So book 11 is written. We haven't edited it yet. And then we are in the middle of writing book 12. And then book 13 will finish off the Pantracia Chronicles main series. When that is finished, hopefully by the end of the year, if I'm being optimistic, we'll probably just start another series.
Have you ever had, it's funny now, I have a million questions. Like, people talk about writer's block. Well, did like one of you have writer's block and the other one was like, come on, we got to do this, or like?
Yeah, sometimes it works that way but it actually, it helps that there's 2 of us, because if she gets stuck and she's like, oh man, like I just can't think of, I'll be like, it's okay, just give me like 5 seconds, and then like I take over and I get it going, like I pour some gasoline on that, and then as soon as the chapter's kind of rolling, then she like takes over again. And it happens vice versa. Like if I can't think of something and I'm like, I'm stuck, I'm struggling with this part, and she'll jump in and like do something. So we kind of like shove each other through writer's block, because we're not sitting here by ourselves most of the time. So generally we just push each other through it. And so it doesn't really affect us as much as it does when I try to work by myself.
Very cool. Okay. And one more thing. Well, I mean, I have a million things, but, but for now, what is something that you are better at than Kayla, and vice versa? She's not here to yourself.
It's okay. This is easy.
Oh, really?
We talk about this all the time. I'm much better at the action. So like the active events, like when things are happening very quickly, I am really good at writing out those scenes of like intense action. But I tend to get ahead of myself, and I go through it so quickly that I forget to like, oh yeah, I should probably tell the reader what the surroundings look like, because I'm just in the action. And so Kayla's much better at descriptive work than I am, and she gets flowery with her descriptions, and it's pretty, and she creates imagery, and it's great. And that's kind of her strength versus mine. Mm-hmm. But in regards to plot, I love the sap and the romance and the sweet scenes and the reunions, and like I'm really good at writing the cute stuff, and Kayla just wants to kill people. So we kind of balance each other, because she prevents me from getting too sappy, and I keep our characters alive. So
there we go.
It's a good dynamic.
Did you ever have the experience? Many fiction writers have that experience, especially ones who are writing without a full outline, of just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she died, or whatever. Well, what about when there's 2 of you? Did Kayla ever type something that you just kind of sat there saying, you can't kill them, or you can't have her have that sickness, or whatever? Did one of you like surprise the other?
I wouldn't say that we have surprised each other. Generally, we agree on these things ahead of time, but sometimes the characters surprise us. And then we're like, well, how do we deal with this? And we kind of have to fix it together, because we didn't expect something to happen. And, a key example of this is a character named Corin, and he comes in book 5, and he was supposed to be in the book for 1 chapter, but then he ended up having like this crazy chemistry with one of our other characters. And then he ended up on the cover of not just book 5, but also book 7. So,
no way.
And he never left. He's still here. We're still writing about him in book 12. So I think the characters surprise us in the writing more than we surprise each other sometimes.
Okay. I've heard of people telling me that something surprised them in the writing. The character did something they didn't expect. But I love that a character was like, yeah, I'm going to be the star of this book.
Yeah, he decided to stick around.
You thought that I was just in here for like 6 pages, but really I'm the star of the book.
Yep.
That is fabulous. Well, I cannot wait to read more. I think that's just amazing. And next time you're on, we'll have to have Kayla. We'll do one of these, how people hold up. I ask you both a question and you hold up.
We would love that. That would be
Oh my
amazing.
gosh, that would be hilarious. That would be absolutely hilarious. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our next author is Judy Stanigar, the author of Marika's Best Laid Plans. And the author writes, Marika is a social worker trying to heal her drug-addicted clients, but she can't seem to mend her damaged self. She avoids love because love sits too close to death. Her choices have left her carefully ordered life a lonely, disconnected one. Everything is about to change. Big-hearted, quirky, emotionally walled-off Marika embarks on a plan that ultimately forces her to confront the very thing she's spent her life avoiding, love. Marika's Best Laid Plan is the story of the power of connection and hope, the things without which life is unbearable. Please welcome author Judy Stanigar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
So glad to have you here. And where are you hailing from today?
Today I'm from San Diego.
Oh, so you're warmer than I am. I'm in New York today.
Well, actually, we're in the May gray.
Oh.
So it's so May gray and June gloom are two secrets that we don't tell anybody on the East Coast. I was shocked when I came here. Nobody in the East, we think it's always sunny, but May and June, we have the gray from the ocean. The fog rolls in. And so it's kind of gray and it's in the 60s. So don't come to California.
Oh, okay. I got 68 today, so I might be beating you. Okay.
Yeah, so far, yeah.
I did not know that because all of you from San Diego like to tell the rest of us that you have perfect weather every single day.
Yeah, but I'm originally from the Northeast, in New York City, so I know better. I know the surprise that I had when I first came here.
So tell us about the inspiration behind Marika's Best Laid Plans. What got you writing this story?
I will in a second, but first I want to say that I want a partner now.
I know!
I'm so awed by what I just heard. I'm like, yeah, wow, this would be great.
I was thinking the same thing, Judy. I was actually sitting here thinking, who should I partner with?
I know. This sounds fabulous.
It sounds fabulous. And then if you're not feeling up to it, the other person is, and the whole co-writing at the same time. Wow.
Amazing.
I was thinking about my husband, but I like him and I was a little worried.
Yeah. I'm going to start thinking, okay, maybe we could partner up.
I was scared about that. So yeah, no, but Amanda totally inspired me. I'm definitely going to come out with a co-authored book at some point. So.
Yeah.
But you were blissfully alone on this one. My gosh, this is 100% you.
Yeah. So my inspiration was actually, I hesitate to say it's my work. When I first got out of school, my first job was working in a methadone clinic. As a therapist. And so it was the stories of my client that initially inspired me for this book, as well as my personal experience being a child of Holocaust survivors, as my protagonist is. But I say this with the caveat that it's really fiction. The story is fiction. The inspiration isn't.
No, I understand. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. So this protagonist is also a child of Holocaust survivors because it's the trauma that her mother went through and that she's experiencing secondary trauma, intergenerational trauma, that makes her who she is and makes her struggle with the ability to connect to people and to and her fear of loving because love hurts and so on. So it's the combination of that. That's my own inspiration, my own life.
Right.
And working in a methadone clinic with clients who were just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
And I always thought, one day I'm going to write their story.
Nice. Not enough has been said about generational trauma. And we recently had another author on who had written about that. And I was so delighted to have that being brought to the forefront, because I think, I'm certainly not a mental health professional like yourself, but I certainly feel as if there's a lot more to that than people realize. And I think that people just knowing that there's a word for it and that there's a reason for it, I think is incredibly empowering for people to suddenly say, oh, I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I grew up in Israel. Your daughter is now in Haifa. So, I grew up in Israel. And so in a time where, it was pretty soon after the war, maybe a decade or so after the war. And so half of the population were kind of traumatized, a little crazed population. So that really colored, I have to say, that probably impacted my life as a single thing more than anything else. And so maybe that's why I became a therapist, this wanting to know what makes people tick, why we are who we are, and so on. So that's a big part of my life, although I can't say that, oh, I'm so horribly impacted and live with it every day.
Right. But certainly it has to have an impact on you when you're growing up in that scenario. And generationally, even if you personally hadn't, the fact that your parents had.
Absolutely, because your whole worldview is colored by your parents' worldview, whoever your parents are, whether they've been traumatized or not. So if traumatized parents, especially with the Holocaust, their worldview may be dark, people are not to be trusted, and any day now another horrible thing can happen. So you're always kind of like on the alert for bad things. So it whatever your parents' worldview is colors you.
Yeah.
And so this is the traumatized person's worldview.
Yes.
So yeah.
So tell me, in Marika's best laid plans, what were your goals when you were writing it? Did you just have this story in your head and you had to get it down, or were you hoping people would read it and embrace something from it?
I was hoping people would embrace a few things. And one of the things that set me up for writing this is I'm trying to juxtapose the substance abuser and the person who is more or less the worried well, the person who functions well in society, and to see that we're not that different. The substance abuser runs for substances to mask their pain. But all of us who are not using substances have the same issues, and we may be running away from pain in a different way.
Gotcha.
But there is a connection, because I think too often, having worked for many years with substance abusers, the world looks down upon them in a way, kind of like, oh, they are different to us. Well, we're not different. We're all very similar. So that's one of the messages that I was hoping to put out there.
Yeah, well, I think that's a huge message, regardless of substance abuse, is that we are not different.
Right.
That's a huge message all the way around. Right. We are not different. We are all people, and people are
exactly. If we peel away the layers, we are different on the outside. Maybe our cultures are different and all this, but you peel away the layers of whatever culture you are in and whatever makes you different. The core, we all want the same things in life. We want to be successful. We want love. We want to be loved. We want to accomplish something. We want fun. When you as I said, when you peel it all away, there's more things that we have in common than we don't.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what's next for you in writing? Did you get the right?
Okay.
Now there's more?
Actually, I am right now in the midst of writing a memoir
Oh,
of my childhood in Israel, because I think it was kind of like a moment in time. Israel is different to when it was then.
sure.
So yeah, and actually I'm trying to also make a few short stories. I just got a short story that's going to be part of the memoir, published in a magazine. So, you know, it's exciting to write something that's taking me way back when,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and while I'm doing it, something was uncovered about, that I uncovered about my parents, and this group that I didn't know existed, of children of parents who were sent to Cyprus. Their descendants formed a group, and then I found pictures of my parents that I didn't know existed when they were in their 20s. And so it's like a voyage of discovery for me. So it's really fun.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I'm glad to hear that Marika's best laid plans is not going to be the last thing you write. That's for sure. So that they're
Thank you.
glad to hear it. And thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you.
Our third author today, Mariam Houli, is the author of The Olive Tree. And our author writes, Nisma is like any other 16-year-old. She goes to school, she fights with her brothers, and she loves her grandmother. But life for Nisma isn't as simple as boys and books. Nisma is an Islamic Palestinian in Israel, and her new friend, Hannah, is a Zionist. When Hannah's mother is attacked and Nisma invites the pair to live in her family home, she has no idea of the chain of events that she has set in motion. What unfolds will show Nisma that in a country shrouded by corruption, bigotry, and segregation, love and compassion is her best chance at survival. A love letter to the Palestinian people, Mariam Houli's The Olive Tree is a heartbreaking and gripping debut, a tale of friendship, strength, and loss, and the fatal consequences systematic prejudice can have on a country's people. Please welcome author Mariam Houli. So nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining me. First of all, I absolutely adore the cover of your book. That is just such a peek into it. And what a description. If that doesn't encapsulate everything that we were just speaking about people and love. Thank you so much for that. So I was going to ask you where you're hailing from today, but I know you're in Melbourne, Australia today. The other side.
Yes, I'm from Melbourne.
How long have you been there?
I'm born here. I was born in Australia.
Lucky you. You don't sound like you were born in Australia.
Our accent is, we don't know what the Aussie accent. No, we're born here.
Not as strong as I guess I would have expected. So tell me a little bit about The Olive Tree. What was the germination of the thought for this book? What got you started?
So The Olive Tree I actually wrote a few years ago. I write fiction with a purpose in general and just an outlet for me in life. And I wrote The Olive Tree thinking, you know, where on planet Earth is the most violence and most hatred in the world. So, you know, that place of the world, although I'm not Palestinian, I'm Lebanese, my parents are Lebanese, and I've never set a foot in the country, but I could have imagined what happened and what happens in a country that's shrouded by war and corruption. I myself actually have been caught up in 2 civil wars in Lebanon and the Israel-Lebanon war as well in 2006. So real war is not what the media portrays. That's what I can tell you. It's way worse than any portrayal that anyone can ever do.
I am so sure you're right. And
Can
that,
you hear me, Steph?
yes, I can hear you. That is such a horrifying thought that it's actually worse than what is being portrayed, because what we see is pretty awful. So,
Mm.
what an interesting. Now I'm if I'm following you correctly, you had this idea and decided to set it in a place where you knew there was so much turmoil, as opposed to the other way around, having the location in mind and working from there.
Yes, 100%. Well, and it comes down, as you read the book and stuff, it comes down to, and I think what the other authors were saying, and you're right, it intertwines that if you peel off the layers, humans all are essentially the same.
Mm-hmm.
They all want to live, and they want to have families, and they all want to be safe. And yeah, this is exactly what the essence of the olive tree is.
Yes, yes, that's so true. And exactly what, Judy was talking about with Marika's new plan. And also, quite frankly, when you're talking about the desire to be safe, to be loved, Amanda's book, a similar theme, because it is a human theme. Isn't that what we all want, is to be safe and to feel love?
100%. And yes, I feel safe and loved, but also, no, children pay the ultimate price in any war.
Mm.
As they grow up, as they have their own families, it never leaves them. You can have all the therapy in the world, but it will never eradicate the memories and everything that they went through. No matter, wherever they go, it's absolutely heartbreaking. That's who the ultimate price is paid by kids.
You're absolutely right. How many times do we see scenes of war, whether it is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or the Ukraine or any place else, and you see kids who are being affected. And Judy was just talking about growing up in the shadow of that, and what an effect that has on people. You are so right about that. I wonder, now that you have written this, and you said yourself you've never actually been to the location you wrote about, have you wanted to go there and check it out and see, or was it actually better for you to have some distance and be able to write and do your research from afar?
No, I think writing from afar is much better because maybe I won't be as biased, because it's not a book about religion. The Olive Tree is essentially a book about humanity. It's not, I don't talk about either religions. It's a family book. It talks about, domestic violence and poverty and
Yeah, so
all the normal things in a country shrouded by war that happens on top of everything else that any other, any other way. But had I probably been Palestinian, or had I been to the place, I probably would have been biased. I wouldn't be able to write from a neutral place. And it's not taking, and I explain to people, it's not me taking, it's not a side thing, it's not a religion, who's right and who's wrong. It's just an essence of a 16-year-old girl that wants to live, that doesn't understand why we can't just get along and live. And if religion's the problem, then there's something wrong, because no God anyone believes in says you should kill each other and murder each other and live in poverty. It's just, that's absolutely wrong.
Yeah, no, I love what that thought of it being better for you to have that distance. Sometimes I think there's a saying that I'm sure all three of our authors here have heard, that we should write what we know. But sometimes when we're too close to it, it has its own problems. And I think, Mariam, you make a really good case for wanting to have a little bit of distance, because you want to make sure that the focus is on the people and the story and their lives, and not getting clouded over by, other preconceived notions. I think that that's a great insight that you had there about that. Tell me something. Are you working on anything else next? And where is it?
Yes, I'm halfway through writing Souls of the Devil. It's a book again filled with, so usually the way I write is everything that our cultures and our society doesn't talk about, I sort of weave into a story. Narcissism, domestic violence again, corruption,
Yeah.
incest, rape, everything that, people seem to think that doesn't exist in society. I like to write about. I like to, peel back and write. So Souls of the Devil will be a very heavy, long novel.
My goodness gracious. Okay, well, I can't wait to see that one come out. But now that we have 3 successful authors here today with us, I often say that there's a statistic that 90% of the population wants to write a book. That's what they say at Book Expo. I believe that because everybody I meet, if I go out, wants to write a book. They did write a book. They've got half a book shoved into a drawer. It's a thing. But you 3 actually represent success. You did it. You wrote the book. So what words of advice would you have for someone else who's watching right now and saying, they make it sound so easy, but I can't do that. I can't write a book. Amanda, what would you say to somebody who wanted some advice?
I'd say some advice that I was told a long time ago, and I'm not even sure who told me. It was probably one of my teachers. But as writers, I think another statistic that is often thrown at us is how few of us, make it. How few of us actually can earn a living off of writing. And I think the percentage of like financial success stories is quite low. At least that's what we're told. And I often, if someone asks me for advice about that and how to get over that hump and how to persevere, I tell them, I'm like, the only way for a writer to fail, the only way for you to fail as a writer is to stop writing. Because at the end of the day, there's nobody here that's going to fire you. If it's going to be you, if you're going to fire yourself, then that's it. That's what's going to happen. But if you don't give up, if you just keep writing, then nothing can stop you and you won't fail, because failure is essentially completely up to you, which I think makes this industry very unique, because it doesn't take anything extraordinary to write a book. All it takes is perseverance and for you not to give up on yourself. So that's what my advice would be. It would be just keep writing.
I love that. And I often myself try to separate people from being a writer and being I guess the word would be financially independent writer. Those are 2 very, very different things. And I personally hate when people equate one with the other. For example, if I wanted to take up tennis and enjoy playing and play, 5 days a week, and I'm on a doubles team, and it's a big part of my life. That's wonderful. That doesn't change whether or not I ever win the US Open. And just like writers who are financially independent might represent a very small percentage, that doesn't mean the rest of them are any less writers.
Exactly. So if you want to be a writer, all you have to do is write, and you're a writer just like the rest of us. Like, that's it's right. Not just that's it.
Right. And don't presume that unless you are a quote unquote financially independent writer, that means that you are not a writer. You're a writer, absolutely. Just like someone's a skier, or someone's a boater, or whatever they might be doing. They are those things because they choose to be. So thank you. That's awesome. Judy, what would you say for advice?
Well, I can't top what was being said, because I think the same thing, that it's in the writing. If you're not going to actually hunker down and write, it's not going to happen. And I know I am not the most disciplined person in the world, and I've got other things to do. I've got to do laundry or whatever, anything but to write. So yes, it's just writing is number one. And the other thing that helped me is actually joining some writing groups because I don't have a partner. I'm rethinking, but joining a group was very, very helpful for me because then it forces you to put your work out there and to get feedback. And get out of your shell and out of your bubble. And finally, I also want to say that I really wholeheartedly second what you just said, that you have to ask yourself, why are you writing? I met a guy and I was at the library doing a signing, and he said to me, well, how do you know what you're going to start writing and what you're going to write is going to be what the market wants at that moment? And I said to him, you know what, it depends what your goal is. If your goal is to write and to sell 1 million books, that's one goal. But if your goal is to write because you have a story to tell, that's a second goal. And just like you said, you play tennis, is your goal to win the US Open and Wimbledon, or is your goal to play tennis? And that's the same with the writing. If your goal is to write and you have a story to tell, then just do it. If it helps to get out of your, it's an isolated kind of experience, unlike a job where someone tells you, here's a bonus because you good job, no one tells you anything. You're there with yourself. So it helps to go out there and maybe join a writer's group or something like that.
I think that's a great idea. And one thing that has come about in the past couple of years with lockdowns and such, a positive, is that so many of those groups that used to be in person and, if you didn't live near another writer, you couldn't meet. Now everybody's online. I don't know what Amanda and Kayla were doing before the pandemic. They were way ahead of us. They were already Google Docs and Zoom or whatever they were doing. But the rest of us were actually meeting in person with the 3 people who live in our town. And now the world is our oyster. So
exactly.
It is great for writing groups. Mariam, how about you? What would you say for advice for a new writer?
Just get it done. For me, I can't write, although I've got a literature degree, I can't write the way we were taught. Everything is in my head, the whole scenario, and it just gets put on paper first, old-fashioned way, and then I transfer onto my laptop. But for me, writing's emotionally draining, and it's okay to take your time. It's not a race. Just start, and as you, because it took me years to write the illustrator. As I grew older, my perspective changed, and it's okay to come back and change things. And as as things change for you, it's absolutely not a race, it's a marathon. Take your time and enjoy the journey. And it doesn't matter if you don't sell 1 million copies. If you have a story to tell, as Judy said, and it can impact one person's life, or encapsulate them in your story, then you've done it. You've done the job. You're an amazing writer then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. I want to remind all of our viewers of your books. And my final question is, who should I be buying your book for today? If I'm going to go book shopping for someone on my list, would you please describe who on my list I should buy a copy? So Judy, tell us a little bit about Marika's Best Laid Plans. Who should I buy a copy for today?
If you have a friend who is maybe feeling a little hopeless, struggling with a problem and thinking, oh, the situation is just kind of down in the dumps, I think this book is all about hope. And it's sharing a struggle of one person or a few people and a few characters, and showing that that hope is that thing with feathers. That's why the feather at the thing. Hope is, yes. So if you have someone who has any kind of emotional struggle, I think that's a good book.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mariam, same question for you. The Olive Tree. Who should I buy a copy of this for? Can you describe who is your ideal reader? Mariam, can you hear me?
Well, funnily enough, when I wrote this book, I thought that my ideal reader, yes, I can hear,
Great.
I can hear.
Wonderful. So your ideal reader?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So Mariam, you were telling us about your ideal reader.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Initially wrote the Olive Tree. I thought my ideal reader was actually, late teens to early 20s. But when we published, yes. So can you hear me now properly? I don't know, there's something wrong with the lines. Stephanie?
Yes, I'm here. Mariam, you were saying?
Oh, beautiful. Sorry, I can't hear you, that's all. So my ideal reader, I thought was a late teen. Yeah, my ideal reader, I thought was late teens, early 20s. But then when we published and the reviews came in, it's actually for any age group, anyone that is invested in an emotional story, in family, that wants a change, then the Olive Tree is for them.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Amanda, who should I be buying Embrace of the Shade? Well, somebody who loves to read, because there's 10 books in this series. So
Yes. I mean, it would be great for a reader who loves long series. Our books are actually, they're great for the experienced fantasy reader, but they're also great for those who want to start reading fantasy because it's not as dense of a read like traditional fantasy, Tolkien, George R. R. Martin, it's not so dense. It's much easier to read and it's faster paced. So I have readers of all ages, some as young as 12, 13, depending on obviously with their parents' permission and knowledge of what is in the book, because there is some theme. And then we have readers all the way into their 80s. My grandparents love my books and they're
Really?
90 years old. And so I think it's good for someone who loves fantasy and wants like a new world to like dive into and get totally obsessed with, because that's what we've built. And it's great for romance lovers and people who are struggling. We have a lot of mental health issues in our books that our characters face, and how they overcome those trials. And yeah, I think just someone who loves fantasy and magic and love.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you to the three of you for joining us today. I know that you all have projects in the works. So when those next projects are done, please come back and join me between the covers and send any materials you have so we could share them with our audience. But thanks for the inspiration and the great books, and happy writing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Between the Covers. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're an author who would be interested in appearing on our show, or perhaps you're a member of a book club, we do host book clubs as well, please visit betweenthecoverstv.com. By the way, at betweenthecoverstv.com, you can watch past episodes in addition to learning more about our authors and guests. So sign up there if you would like to be a guest on the show yourself. And if you have some books that you would like to get written or published, visit redpenguinbooks.com. Thanks so much for joining us.